The gala glittered with diamonds and ego. Cameras flashed, violins hummed, and laughter echoed through the golden ballroom, until one glass of red wine changed everything. She was the billionaire's wife, elegant, entitled, untouchable. He was the guest of honor, a black CEO whose quiet confidence unsettled those who mistook wealth for worth. When the crimson liquid splashed across his white suit, the room froze. Gasps, whispers, eyes darting between power and prejudice. But what the crowd didn't know was that the man she humiliated had once built the very foundation her empire stood upon. And tonight, he wasn't here to forgive. He was here to reclaim. Within hours, her empire and her illusion of superiority would begin to crumble, one secret at a time. The night had begun like every other high society affair, a celebration of power disguised as philanthropy. The ballrooms sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers, where the city's elite toasted themselves with champagne and rehearsed smiles. At the center of it all stood Evelyn Mercer, the billionaire's wife, flawless in appearance, sharp in tongue, and certain the world revolved around her. Every movement she made commanded attention, not out of grace, but entitlement. Across the room, Dr. Adrian Cole adjusted the cufflinks on his snow-white suit. Calm, composed, and impossible to ignore, he carried an aura that didn't need validation. Years of climbing through a corporate world that quietly underestimated him had taught him one thing: true power doesn't shout. It stands still and lets others tremble. He had been invited to this gala not just as a guest, but as the keynote sponsor. His tech firm had recently acquired one of Mercer Industries' subsidiaries, a move that shook Wall Street. What few in the room knew was that Evelyn's husband, Richard Mercer, had once turned down Adrian's proposal years ago, dismissing it as ambitious for someone like you. Now, the tables had turned. The empire that once looked down on him now owed its survival to his innovation. Yet, as Adrian navigated through polite small talk and veiled envy, Evelyn's piercing gaze followed him with quiet resentment. To her, his success wasn't a victory. It was an insult to everything she believed about hierarchy, legacy, and race. When she approached him, her smile brittle, her words soaked in condescension, Adrian already knew the evening was about to take an unexpected turn. The crowd gathered. Cameras pointed. The world watched through glittering eyes as Evelyn lifted her glass, a soft clink of crystal, a subtle smirk, and then a deliberate tilt of her wrist, sending scarlet wine cascading down his pristine suit. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, electric. But Adrian didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, too calm. Behind that, stillness hid years of endurance, every insult, every dismissal, every boardroom whisper. He simply smiled, whispered a quiet thank you, and walked away, leaving behind a trembling woman who had no idea she had just signed her own downfall. Adrian walked away. The crowd's murmurs followed him like ripples after a stone hits water. Phones subtly lifted, flashes sneaked through the air, and whispers twisted into rumors before the orchestra could resume its tune. Evelyn stood frozen, her painted smile dissolving beneath the weight of 100 stares. She told herself it was nothing. A harmless joke, a social moment soon to be forgotten. But deep down, she knew something in that man's quiet stare had unsettled her in a way no confrontation ever had. It wasn't anger she saw in his eyes. It was clarity, the kind of calm that only people who hold real power possess. That night, Evelyn returned home to her mansion in the hills, wine still on her sleeve, arrogance still in her voice. She laughed it off with her friends over the phone, mocking how dramatically people had reacted. But while she slept in silk sheets, the world outside had already begun shifting. By morning, the incident was viral. A single clip, 12 seconds long, showed her smirking as she poured wine onto the black CEO's white suit. It was replayed, dissected, and reposted across every social platform with one haunting caption. "This is what power looks like when it forgets its limits." The internet didn't need context. It had judgment. Brands began distancing themselves from Mercer Industries. Sponsors pulled out of collaborations. The company's stock dropped 5 points before noon. But the real storm wasn't in the media. It was brewing in the boardroom, because while Evelyn was still composing her half-hearted apology, Adrian Cole was already in motion. He didn't post a single word online. He didn't need to. His company, Cole Dynamics, quietly announced the termination of 3 major contracts with Mercer Industries, deals that generated nearly 30% of their annual revenue. The next shareholders' meeting, Richard Mercer arrived late, face pale, trying to contain the chaos. Every eye in that glass-walled boardroom was on him. Slides were showing numbers, downward arrows, red graphs, collapsing confidence. But the true moment of reckoning came when the next slide appeared. Cole Dynamics, new acquisition proposal. Adrian's firm had offered to buy Mercer Industries, not in partnership, but in takeover. A clean acquisition, with majority control. The same company that once rejected him now stood inches from falling into his hands. Reporters hounded Evelyn for comment. She gave interviews wrapped in designer coats, painting herself as misunderstood, but every attempt only deepened the wound. Each word reminded people that privilege rarely apologizes. It just explains. Meanwhile, Adrian remained silent. No statements, no appearances. His silence spoke louder than any outburst could. Investors began migrating toward him, seeing stability where Mercer offered scandal. Quietly, power began to shift, the kind of shift that doesn't make noise until it's irreversible. Days later, at an emergency gala intended to repair Mercer's public image, Evelyn attended once again, perfectly dressed, overly poised, desperately pretending the world still admired her. But when she entered, something was different. People no longer leaned toward her. They leaned away. Conversation stopped when she approached. Her empire of influence had become a ghost town of whispers. And then she saw him again. Adrian Cole, standing by the balcony, speaking to reporters. His presence magnetic, yet effortless. For the first time, she realized he wasn't fighting to prove anything. He had already won. As she turned to leave, a journalist asked her one question that sliced through the noise. "Mrs. Mercer, you regret what you did?" Her lips trembled for a response, but before she could find one, the massive screen behind them flickered, displaying the official press release. "Cole Dynamics completes acquisition of Mercer Industries, effective immediately. The room," gasped. The cameras turned. Evelyn stood under the same golden light where she had once humiliated him. But this time, it was her face the crowd watched crumble. And somewhere amid the applause and flashbulbs, Adrian simply adjusted his cufflinks. His white suit spotless this time, untouchable. The word effective immediately echoed through the hall like a verdict. Reporters surged forward, their flashes strobing across Evelyn's frozen face as the letters on the massive screen glowed behind her. Cole Dynamics now owned Mercer Industries. Adrian didn't need to gloat. The truth was doing it for him. Every eye that once looked down on him now turned upward, not out of pity, but reverence. The same crowd that had once snickered behind champagne glasses now scrambled to shake his hand. And as he stepped forward, calm as ever, the space around him parted, as if even arrogance recognized its new master. Evelyn's breath quickened. The room spun, the chandelier light splintering across the marble floor. Her husband stood at the far end of the hall, his expression a storm of disbelief and shame. He avoided her eyes, not out of anger, but fear, because he knew what had just happened was irreversible. Adrian's speech began not with triumph, but poise. He spoke of accountability in leadership, of respect being the true foundation of progress. He never mentioned her name, not once. Yet every word carried her shadow. Every sentence peeled another layer from her image until the whole hall could see what power without humility truly looked like. Evelyn tried to stand tall, chin raised, but her hands trembled. The crowd wasn't looking at her. They were studying her like a fallen monument. She reached for her glass to steady herself, but her reflection in the wine's surface startled her. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman staring back, stripped of status, trembling beneath her own choices. Then the applause began. Not for her, but for him. Thunderous, relentless, cleansing. Adrian nodded humbly, eyes scanning the crowd once before landing, deliberately, on her. No words, no smile. Just quiet acknowledgement, the kind that says, "You taught me what not to become." Outside the gala, cameras flashed like lightning. The story had already rewritten itself. "Black CEO restores dignity with grace," one headline read. Another, "Mercer Empire collapses after racial scandal." As the limousine doors closed behind her, Evelyn felt the weight of silence for the first time in her life. Her empire wasn't stolen. It was surrendered. Not by force, but by arrogance. And as Adrian's car passed hers on the same road, his calm silhouette illuminated by the city lights, she realized the cruel symmetry of it all. She had poured wine to stain a man's pride. He had poured truth to cleanse his own name. The city awoke the next morning to headlines that didn't just report a business story, they told a parable. The image of Adrian Cole standing beneath the Mercer logo had gone viral overnight. Not because of wealth, but because of what it symbolized: dignity reclaiming its seat at the table. In boardrooms across the country, executives whispered his name with a mix of awe and unease. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't sued. He'd simply moved with precision, allowing arrogance to defeat itself. Cole Dynamics became a case study in leadership, proof that grace could be sharper than vengeance. Evelyn Mercer's world, however, grew quieter by the day. Her phone stopped ringing. Invitations disappeared. The charity board she once chaired voted her out to preserve reputation. Even her husband retreated into silence, drowning himself in late-night calls and financial damage control. The Dud mansion that once buzzed with staff and laughter now echoed with isolation. Some nights, Evelyn scrolled through old photos, her flawless smile, her parties, her press clippings, and wondered how a single act, a single second of arrogance, had rewritten her entire story. The world hadn't destroyed her. She had. Meanwhile, in a sleek office overlooking the skyline, Adrian stood before a glass wall as sunlight painted the city gold. His reflection stared back at him, calm, composed, resolute. The very suit she had once stained now hung in a glass frame behind his desk, untouched and preserved, not as revenge, but as a reminder. He didn't hate her. In fact, he pitied her, because true power was never about dominance. It was about discipline, and while she had spent her life demanding respect, he had quietly earned it. Months later, during a televised interview, a reporter asked Adrian the question everyone wanted to hear: "If you could speak to Mrs. Mercer today, what would you say?" He paused, gaze distant but unwavering. "I'd say, power means nothing if it costs you your humanity. And respect, it's not a privilege you demand. It's the echo of how you treat others." The clip went viral within hours. But unlike the first one, this one healed more than it hurt. It became a message, replayed in classrooms, offices, and homes, a reminder that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in silence and leaves the room transformed. And as the world moved on, so did he. No bitterness, no victory lap. Just quiet redemption. The kind that rewrites history not with revenge, but with grace. Because in the end, the greatest revenge was never humiliation. It was evolution.